Today is Wednesday, June 17th, 2026, and today is National Eat Your Vegetables Day, which is one of those holidays that feels less like a celebration and more like a reminder. Somebody, somewhere, looked at the calendar and decided we all needed encouragement. And after digging through today's stories, I noticed something unexpected. All of them involve things people imagined long before they actually saw them. A giant statue crossing an ocean. A creature that spent centuries hiding in stories and sailors' tales, and a distant world that remained a blurry dot until very recently. Welcome to Wait, That's Random, This Day in History. I'm C.L. Burns, voice actor, audiobook narrator, and your guide through the moments where humanity somehow became both impressive and ridiculous simultaneously. On June 17, 1885, the Statue of Liberty arrived in New York Harbor. Now, technically, it didn't arrive looking much like the Statue of Liberty, at least not at first. The statue had been built in France as a gift to the United States. To make transportation possible, it had been carefully disassembled into hundreds of pieces and packed into more than 200 crates. Imagine opening those crates without knowing what they contained. You'd be looking at piles of copper sheets, iron supports, and oddly shaped components. Not exactly the symbol of freedom we recognize today. The ship carrying the statue, the French frigate Escher, crossed the Atlantic and entered New York Harbor to enormous public excitement. People already knew about the project. Newspapers had covered it extensively. Fundraising efforts had attracted attention on both sides of the ocean. Yet there is a big difference between hearing about something and seeing it arrive. One detail I enjoy is that the pedestal wasn't even finished when the statue got there. For a while, New York essentially had a giant collection of statue parts waiting for a home. Fundraising for the pedestal had stalled until newspaper publisher Joseph Pulitzer launched a campaign encouraging ordinary citizens to contribute. Thousands did. School children donated coins. Families sent small amounts of money. The pedestal was completed. The statue was assembled. And eventually one of the most recognizable landmarks in the world took its place in the harbor. What's fascinating is how quickly people embraced it. Today it's difficult to imagine New York without it. But there was a moment when it existed only as an ambitious idea. And speaking of things people knew about long before they actually saw them, June 17th gave us one of the most satisfying moments in marine biology. On June 17, 2001, scientists announced one of the first successful photographs of a giant squid in its natural environment. And honestly, giant squid had been frustrating scientists for a very long time. People knew they existed. Fishermen encountered remains. Whales showed signs of battling them. Occasional specimens washed up ashore. Yet actually seeing one alive in the deep ocean proved incredibly difficult. The animals spent much of their lives in deep, dark waters far below the surface, a place that is difficult for humans to visit and difficult to study. As a result, giant squid occupied a strange space between science and legend. For centuries, sailors told stories of enormous tentacled creatures lurking beneath the waves. Many of those stories became exaggerated. Sea monsters grew larger. Details became more dramatic. The line between observation and imagination became blurry, which is understandable. When someone describes a creature with giant eyes, 8 arms, 2 feeding tentacles, and a body longer than a bus, the story already sounds fictional. Then came the photographs, and suddenly the giant squid stopped being something people talked about and became something people could actually see. One thing that surprised me is how enormous their eyes are. They're among the largest eyes in the animal kingdom. Some can be roughly the size of a dinner plate. That's a useful adaptation when you're trying to detect movement in the darkness of the deep ocean. The photographs didn't solve every mystery surrounding giant squid. Scientists still have questions about their behavior, reproduction, and life cycle. But the images accomplished something important. They transformed a creature from rumor into reality. And then there are things we knew existed but couldn't see clearly. not because they were hiding in the ocean, but because they were billions of miles away. On June 17, 2015, NASA's New Horizons spacecraft began sending back increasingly detailed images of the planet formerly known as Pluto. And yes, I know, some of you are already preparing to write letters. The Pluto debate has become one of astronomy's most unexpectedly emotional topics. Regardless of what label you prefer, here's the important part. For most of human history, Pluto wasn't a world. It was a dot, a tiny point of light. Even after its discovery in 1930, the best images available showed almost no detail. Maps were mostly educated guesses. Artists filled in the blanks. Scientists made predictions. Nobody knew exactly what Pluto looked like. Then, New Horizons arrived. After traveling for nearly a decade and covering more than 3 billion miles, the spacecraft finally got humanity its first close-up look. The images were astonishing. Instead of a frozen, featureless ball, Pluto revealed mountains, vast plains, complex terrain, unexpected geological activity, and, of course, the famous heart-shaped region that immediately captured public attention. One thing I remember from that summer was how many people reacted emotionally. Not because Pluto changed, because our understanding changed. A world that had existed only in textbooks and imagination suddenly became a real place. A place with landscapes, textures, features, personality. The mission also served as a reminder that exploration isn't over. Even in the 21st century, there are still places humanity has never seen up close. That's a wonderful thought. And after spending today's episode around things that challenged imagination, it feels appropriate to end with someone who built an entire career doing exactly that. Born on June 17, 1898 in the Netherlands, M.C. Escher became one of the most recognizable artists of the 20th century. What's remarkable is that many people recognize his work even if they don't recognize his name. You've probably seen it. Staircases that appear to climb forever. Water flowing uphill. Buildings that seem possible at first glance and impossible a moment later. Escher loved visual puzzles. He explored symmetry, perspective, geometry, and perception in ways that continued to fascinate viewers. One thing I appreciate about his work is that it rewards curiosity. You look once, then you look again. Then suddenly you notice something you missed. And then something else. His artwork became especially popular among mathematicians, scientists, engineers, and anyone who enjoys asking, wait, how is that supposed to work? The answer is usually, it isn't. That's the point. Escher understood that our brains are constantly making assumptions about the world. His art exposed those assumptions, and somehow managed to be entertaining at the same time. Looking back across today's stories, I noticed a common theme. Sometimes the hardest part isn't discovering something. It's seeing it clearly. People knew the Statue of Liberty existed before it arrived. People knew giant squid existed before they photographed one. People knew Pluto existed before New Horizons got there. Yet seeing something for yourself changes the relationship. It becomes real. Stories become places. Rumors become evidence. Anyway, that's what I ended up finding while working through June 17th. And before I go, here's today's oddly appropriate quote. The real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes. Marcel Proust. If you'd like to hear more of my work, audiobooks, or other projects I've somehow gotten myself involved in, you can find everything over at waitthat'srandom.com. I'm C.L. Burns, and honestly, thank you for spending a little time being curious with me. I'll see you tomorrow.